let's take it one step further, because I know this is not your first convention. 4 years ago, there was a lot of enthusiasm for then Senator Barack Obama running for president. One of the things he said was he was going to close down Guantanamo Bay. That hasn't happened, and in fact, there's some who say there's really not much daylight between Bush's policy and Barack Obama's policy. Your thoughts on that?
Well, yes, I think the reason Senator Obama became President Obama is because of the one crucial difference between Obama and Clinton. Clinton supported the war in Iraq, and Senator Obama did not. And yet that message, I feel, was lost on him. So he does become president. He's swept in by all sorts of movements, young people, the anti-war movement, the environmental movement, the gay and lesbian movement, the social, racial justice movements, and he becomes president. And what does he go on to do? Well, I'm not saying he didn't keep a promise. He never said he'd end the war in Afghanistan. He was opposed to the war in Iraq. And so we see this war continue. And I think that goes to the issue of the media. I see the media as a huge kitchen table that stretches across the globe that we all sit around and debate and discuss the most important issues of the day, like war and peace and life and death. And anything less than that is a disservice to the servicemen and women of our country, because they can't have these debates on military bases. They rely on us and civilian society to have the discussions that lead to the decisions about whether they live or die, whether they are sent to kill or be killed. Anything less than that is a disservice to a democratic society.
Well, let's move you over to the kitchen table and let's discuss one other thing, which is, well, two things actually. One is rendition, where these suspects are nabbed in one country. They don't want to torture them here in the United States, can't get away with it, so it goes to another friendly country where that's okay. And then, of course, the drone attacks. And one might say if this was looked through a Western prism at another country doing this sort of thing, you'd think that the United States would be howling, and yet it seems as though it's acceptable within the leaderships of both parties.
I mean, it's interesting you raise that, as I'm here in North Carolina, because Aero Contractors is here. They are the company that was contracted to engage in some of these what's known as extraordinary rendition flights, which is simply White House for kidnapping, where people are taken off the streets of a country and they're sent off somewhere else to be tortured. I mean, we know about it. It happened in the U.S. working with Egypt, with Mubarak, where people were sent to Egypt. It happened where people were sent to Libya, and they were tortured. You know, it's so interesting. If you look at the Arab Spring and the dictators that were overthrown, it's some of the same people that the U.S., Syria as well. I think of Maher Arar, who is a young Canadian Syrian, who, in fact, this Canadian Syrian was sent back he was trying to go back home to Canada after a vacation, and the U.S. took him off a flight at JFK Airport in New York, and they sent him to Syria, where he was tortured and held in a cell underground. It's very interesting to look at the very dictators that the people have challenged and see how the U.S. worked with them over the years. And this issue that you raise of Guantanamo, one of the first statements of President Obama when he was in office, when he first became president and was inaugurated, was to say he would close Guantanamo in a year. Well, it's almost 4 years now, and you certainly don't hear Guantanamo raised on the floor of the Democratic National Convention by the speakers, though oddly, in a bizarre address, Clint Eastwood, the famous actor, you know, Dirty Harry and all that, was one of the keynote speakers of the Republican convention. I'm sure to Mitt Romney's surprise as well, he raised the issue of President Obama not closing Guantanamo. Not that Mitt Romney was for that.
Let me ask one final question. It's got to be brief. We're out of time. But are we safer today than we were on September 11th, 2001?
When the U.S. engages in war, I do not think that we are safe. I think safety, national security, is determined by the health of a population, by the level of education, of health care, of access to food that people have. And in the United States, we're unfortunately on a downward trajectory when it comes to poverty, when it comes to access to education, when it comes to jobs. And that is really ultimately that makes us safer.
Amy Goodman, thanks again for your perspective. Appreciate it.